Now, you said you don't like ad-libbing.
That's the worst thing in the world.
What do you explain what that means?
Explain ad-libbing. Let's say now I've got a machinist up here, and I've just drawn something out. I've dimensioned it. You make it this way. And he takes it up, and he makes it. But, geez, he has trouble with this tool, or he doesn't set it up wrong, and the dimensions aren't quite the same. And it doesn't work the way I thought it would. I assumed that he's made it right. So I've learned way back, and I learned this from Bill Lear. What I do when I check my dimension, is it exactly like? Now, maybe it wasn't intentional they did it that way, but 9 times out of 10 it's ad-libbing. It is intentional. And they can ruin you. In other words, your idea wouldn't work, and you can't figure why it didn't work, and you abandon it. And somebody will come up with it 10 years later, or you will, down the line, and feel, holy God, that's ad-libbing.
You think about how these machines are going to affect people.
Oh, first of all, in other words, absolutely. In other words, as far as ventilation, we've got, as I said earlier, a heart and a lung. We don't want to depress cardiac output or the output of the heart to ventilate them, and that's what I've resolved. But it's taken a lot of years to do that. In other words, ventilators we had were way ahead of everyone. In other words, if that was the last chance, let's put it that way. But now we have the addition, we can improve cardiac output, so our survival's gone up like this, you see. Yeah.
So it impacts people.
It impacts people. And you know, for the will of God, you could be that next patient. And that's what when you ask any person here, we may be the next patient. And that's important.
So that's what you people think about that then.
They do. And if they better be serious, or we don't want them here.
Now you say you get a little bit of ourselves from our dad and a little bit of ourselves from our mom. What do you think you got from your mom?
My mom gave me a darn good home. She really did, and she kept a good home. And she was a disciplinist too. And my father probably wasn't the disciplinist, my mother was, but boy, I wouldn't do anything because of my father, because of respect for my father. And he involved me in everything, which my mother couldn't have done. But my mom was a regular gal, and she did a great home, and she could do about anything. Like, because I said earlier, she could take all our furniture in the home or antiques that she'd restored and upholstered and so on, and she could do anything. Like I remember the first covering of the Waco, man, she could do fabric work better than I could. She used to cut out a lot of the stuff and so on, but she was always right there with us. Yeah.
Did your parents get to see some of your success?
My dad died right after. I took my dad on the last airplane ride. My dad was called up and he'd had cancer in 1937, and he had surgery in the early days and so on. But he recovered. It took him a long time to recover. And he was back. He was active in the National Guard. He was on flight status. And he was called up for strategic warfare at Poling and went down there. And he died the day after Roosevelt died. And he was in Walter Reed probably for the last 6 months, and he wanted to die at home, and he was going to die of cancer. And I took an airplane up in that area just so I'd be there, and I knew it was imminent. And my CO and my dad were good friends. The CO I had then had been in the shoe business, and he knew my dad. So he arranged, he said, well, let's take, and he said, deliver the airplane, do what you have to do for a few days. And I got there. In fact, the day before Roosevelt died, my dad had no use for that guy. I mean, he just thought he was way the hell out. And my dad died the next day. But after he heard on the radio Roosevelt died, he says, at least they outlived that son of a bitch. And I probably shouldn't be saying that. But nevertheless, my dad was just the opposite. In other words, he was conservative and so on, and he wanted to see reason for everything. And he just didn't like that at all. But my dad voted both ways. I've seen him. He was predominant Republican because they were mostly, I guess, more conservative in that time. But I've seen him both. If he knew them and liked them, he'd go both ways. So he wasn't that. But and then my dad died the next day. Yeah, and that was the day after Roosevelt. That was in April, I guess, that year. Yeah.
Did your mother see some of your success?
My mother did. Yes, she lived long enough. She lived till she was 82. And she did. She saw the first generation of respirators, and yes, she did indeed. And I was able to do a few things for her that she might not have been able to do other. But my mom was always a driver, you know. She was always going, always had projects.
So she was proud when she saw your respirator?
She was, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think we did a really good job. Now, what's is there anything that we haven't talked about?
I think generalities. I've never made a lecture like this or been in whatever we're doing here all the way through. I've never gone to these lengths and all the personal effects. So it's strictly off the cuff, everything I've done here.
Do you think it's important that people know about history of aviation and history of things?
Oh, I think history, you see, is the most, I love history, ancient history, and well, because history does repeat itself. And you know, it's like the Bible. The Bible shows the behavior of mankind. And for no other reason, you can find the behavior of every type that you'd ever see in mankind over the years. That's why probably the Bible, to me, is so important, not from the religious side of it, but it shows the behavior of mankind. It really does. And I think all historical books, if we go back to the Romans, and the Egyptians and the Grecians and the Romans and so on, and look, we see the same similarities coming back, only we've added more technicality, but have we added? In other words, look at the things they did. How the hell did they build the pyramids? How did they do all? We've lost that. We don't know. And for some reason, history wasn't reconciled. But there, and you look at the Crusades and all of this, you can see all the interplay between religion and politics and so on. There's nothing really new. We continually learn new disciplines. And we have a brain that the good Lord gave us all the way through. And a lot of people use it and some don't. And you see in society, the way I look at it, there are those people in society that start using the technology and benefit from it. There are those that can't, and they spin out. And they become, boy, I tell you, they do. They say, what the hell, I can't do it, and so on. And they give up. But the people that really like it, and the kids today with their computers, you know, they're not, I guess the thing that bothers me, they're learning it as a rote, that does this and it does that, but they don't know what the hell's behind that key. I think this bothers me a lot with, they may call them computer literate. Hell, they can do anything with it. They just have a feel for it, like Bob Hoover in his airplane, you see all the way through. And I think it's tremendous, but they don't know what the hell's behind the keys. I think that bothers me a little bit.
They're not taking them apart like you would.
They don't take it apart.
So if you were a kid, you'd take it apart.
Yeah, I wanted to see how it was programmed. And I think that's the difference in my generation, to a great extent.
Yeah, I read the other day that George W. Bush, for the last 5 years, has read the Bible beginning to end every year.
I'm not surprised, because first of all, he was in a place where human behavior was everything, wasn't it? And this human behavior is from A to Z. It's all over. And it's just like people here that we have. And nobody's ever worked for me. They work with me. I don't believe in servants at all. We work together as a team. But they have to like what they're doing. And they have to want to keep going more and more and more. But yet you've got somebody that's real good and they don't want to go beyond this. Keep them where they're comfortable. In other words, don't push them beyond their comfort zone. And you have to determine and help them sometimes. And sometimes they just need a little push. Or some realize don't push them because they can't go any further. Okay?
I've been interviewing quite a few CEOs over the last couple of years with these different documentaries, and if you watch the news and watch TV, it's all doom and gloom out there with all the economy and up and down. But all these CEOs that I talk to are so optimistic and confident about the future.
Well, you see, you've got to be confident. You're innately that way all the way through. But I'll tell you, his Pam says, turn that damn television off. Because right now, I really get bothered. Because I've seen all of this and we're taking all the pillar posts away. I mean, things that we've built and we know that don't work. And you know, the one thing about physicians, although we talk about politics and everything else, it's physicians all over. That's another language we have. And I know what the hell's happening in Russia. I know what's happening there because of the physician and our interchange all the time. And it's a world problem. It's not just here. But when we try to take, the biggest thing is, individual is king. And when we start taking the individual and telling the individual how the hell to live, it's just like the French airplane. The French airplane, for Christ's sake, you get in trouble, it tries to tell you what to do. Boeing says, you tell us what to do. And I think that's the whole thing. Individualism is the key to everything. And when we start coming in and telling you what the hell to do, but we get people that want to be told what to do, more and more so. And it's a real problem. And I tell you, as far as Mexicans and so on coming up here, Christ, if I didn't have any opportunity there and I saw one here and I could do it, I'd take the opportunity. See, it's not all the blame there. It's not all the blame.
It's human nature.
It's human nature. So, you know, there's right and wrong everywhere. There's blame there and there. But, you know, it's like, remember the airflow car? They changed everything and Detroit learned to only charge 6%. It's a good lesson. Yeah.
Now, what's this painting behind you? What are all those different kinds of planes?
What are we looking at here? Oh, I didn't realize that was here. Okay, this actually was a RAN PT-22. that I had for a whole bunch of years. It had a little Kinner engine on it. And this particular day, you notice I've got a suit on underneath. And quiet birdman, you know what the QB is. In other words, about 19,000 of us, I guess, and so on. But one of our fellows had died. And we, at that time in Palm Springs, we'd go up and we'd buzz the west, heading west, and buzz. It was part of it all the way through. So they took a picture of me that day. So that's a little piece, but I got a suit on underneath, which I always wore that. These are all airplanes I have. And Pam, I've got this fellow, Tom Sellers, he's a fantastic artist. And he looked at all the different airplanes I had, and he made up that configuration, and Pam had that done. And I tell you, it's really great. These are all airplanes that I have right down now in the hangar, and a few more since then.